Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Possessor. So what Possessor is essentially about is we center on the character of Tasia Voss, and she is this assassin, but not your typical assassin. She's someone that carries out all of her assassinations through going into other people's bodies. It's part of this company that does that, and this is something that she's done for a very long time now, but her new mission that she's doing is pretty much her most dangerous yet. She needs to go into the body of this character, Colin Tate. He is working he's trying to get this interview with this company, that is really threatening the company that Tasia is working for, so she's tasked to basically go after the head of this company and assassinate him, and things are going great until she starts to realize that Colin might not be as unconscious as she thinks he is, and there might be a chance where he starts to take over and possibly destroy her body. So now both of them have to basically fight for consciousness and try to come out of this on top either way. Possessor overall, I was very excited for this film. I didn't really know a lot going into it, but, I watched the trailer, and it's a trailer that really blew me away. David Cronenberg, this is a director that everyone loves a lot, but he's known for, films like this, and so knowing that his son was doing a film, I know this isn't, his first film, but it really was, the first film that's, that really is gauging interest and that people are talking about. And I feel like, Brandon Cronenberg is someone that I was just really excited to see what he would do, but also just the premise of this alone seemed like something that could be really compelling if handled well. I've heard amazing things about this film. I knew I had to check it out before the year ended, so I finally watched it, and holy shit, this lived up to the hype in every way possible. Possessor Uncut is an insane film that definitely lives up to its name for sure. It's one of the most it's one of the most brutal and graphic things you'll see all year, but it is worth every single second of your time, and I really can't praise it enough. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast, and that's definitely one of the best things about this movie. The entire cast here, everyone just does such a great job at playing these roles. I think everyone really is giving it their all here. But we first have to talk about Andrea Riseborough. This is an actress that I've been loving for a while now, going all the way back to things like, say, Bloodline Season 2 and things like that. I've just always been impressed by her as an actress, and I think this is by far one of her best performances yet, because Tasia Voss is someone that has very little identity as a character. She doesn't express emotion a lot. She is very quiet and reserved. In fact, at points it seems like she's kind of adverse to modern society, and I think the way that she handles all of that is very well done. You can see that she's someone that really cares a lot about this cause, and I think Riseborough does a really good job with what she has here. I was very impressed by her performance throughout this film, especially a certain scene towards the end. I think she really killed it there, and I was just really liked what she ended up doing. But without a doubt, this is absolutely the film for Christopher Abbott to really just show his full talents. And I really enjoy Christopher Abbott in a lot of stuff. I think he's a very talented actor, but he truly has never been as good as he is in this movie, because he by far has the hardest job within this entire film. He's playing essentially two characters. He's playing Colin Tate, but he's also playing Tasia Voss as Colin Tate, and he is so convincing in both roles. You can tell when it's Colin Tate speaking, and then you can also tell when it's Voss being Tate. And I think he handles that perfectly. His mannerisms, his expressions, just the way he goes about that are just so impressive. He really just had everything on lock in terms of this character. I think the different deviations between the two, I really enjoyed a lot, and I just thought he gave the most impressive performance in the whole film. A lot of the movie is very much with him, and that's something that you might not know going into this, but this really is his film more than anything. Riseborough is obviously the main character, but a lot of the film is her inside of Abbott's body, and so he really demonstrates that physicality well. He really communicates well, what he's doing. You understand, who is speaking when, and that can be very hard to pull off as an actor because you are essentially playing two characters, but it really does feel like two separate entities, and I don't know how he was able to pull it off so well, but I was just so blown away by what he was able to do and his real ability, and it's probably one of my favorite performances of the entire year. I really think he killed it in this film, and he alone is enough of a reason to watch this film. I think he was phenomenal here. Now, the rest of the cast also does some really great work throughout this film. I really enjoyed Jennifer Jason Leigh. I thought she gave a really strong performance as someone who is very cold-hearted and really just wants the mission to get done in any way possible. She doesn't really care how you have to do it. She just kind of cares that you do it, and I thought she did a really good job with that. Rossif Sutherland is really good. Tuppence Middleton. Sean Bean is really good for what he has. Even Gabrielle Graham, someone who is really not in this movie at all. She's only in like a couple scenes, was still really impressive in this movie. I thought all of the performances here were really well done. I was very impressed by this ensemble overall, and just a really well handled cast in terms of acting. Now we gotta get to the directing and the writing, which, holy shit, this film would not be nearly as good as it is, I think, if it wasn't for the directing here from Brandon Cronenberg, because he really just goes all in when it comes to this film. I mean, you can see that he has employed a lot of what worked within his father. The film is incredibly twisted. This film is incredibly gory, and he doesn't hold back at all. But it also has a lot of substance to it. There's so much that he put into this film. It really just feels like, while he's done other movies before, this is really the film where he shows his true ability. Like, this is what he can really do, and it's one of the most impressive directed films that I've seen pretty much all year. I think his directing here is just really well utilized. It really just feels like he had a real handle on what he wanted this movie to be, and I thought he did a really good job with that. I was very impressed by, I was just really happy with the way this film was directed, and I think he's got a real future ahead of him. Like, if he shows anything, like, the Cronenberg name is going to live on, and it's going to be in Brandon Cronenberg, because he knows what he's doing in terms of directing, but his writing as well is so good to this film, because you look at the premise, and yes, we've seen body swapping sort of films before, we've seen this concept, but what Cronenberg is doing here is far more deep than you really would expect. This really is a film about control and the lack of control and what happens when you're not in control, and how you're constantly like fighting for that. And I think that's something that he handled very well in this movie. The assassination itself, yes, you are very gripped by, but I also was just very impressed with how in-depth he gets with both of these characters. He takes a lot of time to really get you to know who Tasia Voss is. Someone who, again, is almost a blank slate. There's one scene especially where she's literally just rehearsing what she should say in a conversation. You realize that she doesn't really know a lot about the way people communicate, because she's so used to being in other people's bodies. She doesn't have a real identity of her own, and I thought that was a really interesting idea, and I really liked the way that Cronenberg tapped into that. And you also get to see that Tasia isn't just someone that is an assassin. She has a family life, and it's a very complicated one at that. And I think they tap into that aspect of the film very well, too. That's something that I really enjoyed getting to see more of, is her family life and, what she was really going through as a character. I think all of that was just really well handled overall. But then contrasting that with someone like Tate, who has a lot going on in his life as well. And again, a lot of that is shown while Voss is inside of him. But we get a lot of time to explore his life, explore what he's been doing, some of the flaws that he's committed, and things that you don't think are going to be that important end up being way more important later on. And I think the way that he really just focused on the details there was something that I really liked in this film. I think it all just, he really does take his time in telling this story. And for some people, that can get really boring because they want to see the carnage. But trust me, it's one of those films where you need to stick with it and it's going to deliver. And when it delivers, holy shit, does it deliver. I mean, this film does not hold back in terms of its violence, in terms of its relentlessness, but also just in terms of what it's trying to do. I couldn't believe some of the places this film went story-wise, but I thought it just made perfect sense with the type of story he's really trying to tell. You know, again, I think the film really is a metaphor all about the lack of control that we have within ourselves and how sometimes it feels like things are just kind of happening, and how we kind of fight for that control even if it's impossible. And I think that's something that Cronenberg just tapped into very well here. Just his screenplay overall, I think, is honestly pretty brilliant. There are so many things that work well about it, and it's definitely one of my favorite screenplays of the year. I really love the way this film was written, for sure. The cinematography in this film, though, also is a true work of art. It's just absolutely just immaculate in terms of the way it's conceived, but it also just feels so psychedelic. At times it feels very trippy, especially the scenes where Voss is at first being hooked up into Tate. The way that they handle that, I think, is really well done, but especially when it comes to the third act, I mean, you really just get to see just how far the film is willing to go in terms of its visuals, and it's just insane what they were able to accomplish. There are so many visuals that I'm never going to forget in this movie, and I mean that in the best way possible. And sure, the film is very graphic, and I mean really graphic, and I did watch the uncut version of this film, but I think that's like the only real version you can watch anyway, which I definitely recommend watching that one, because I think it's like the one that showcases this film the best. But just the things that they do, the way that they portray all of these murders, none of it feels gratuitous. It feels like the film needs to be this demented. The film needs to be this disgusting in that way. The film needs to be this graphic, and I think they did a really good job with that. You know, I really appreciated just how far the film went in terms of the killings, how far the film went in terms of the violence. It really pushed that stuff forward. It didn't feel like there was any real filter on what was going on, and I think that only helps this film that much more, because it feels like in that situation, this is how that would play out, and I really just ended up enjoying that a lot in this film. I think that is very well done. So yeah, I think the cinematography here is pretty great, and the score as well, I really liked to this movie. I thought the score, again, was very haunting. It's very entrancing in that way. It's one that I definitely will be listening to on my own, and I think just worked very well with this film. I enjoyed the score a lot, and the editing, like I said, that's something that is going to throw some people off. The film really does take its time, but I thought it was very well paced. I will admit there were a couple moments where, you know, it does drag a little bit, but I don't think it dragged to the point where it ever lost me. It was just one of those things where it's like, okay, this is a little bit slow, but I never found myself losing interest in the story. I always found myself staying interested in what was going on. I always found myself staying hooked in, and I think it really just speaks to how good the film is paced here. That being said, as good as this film is, it's not completely perfect. There are definitely a few things that do bring it down. There is really one thing that does bring this down. The only real flaw I would say I have with Possessor overall is that I do wish that the character of Colin Tate, we could have gotten to seen him on his own before Voss takes control of his body, because even though we get to see a large portion of his life, I would have liked to see who he is on his own and not who he is as Voss. You know, we do get to see that eventually, but it just takes a little bit. And I think if they would have done that, it would have made it that much more effective. And don't get me wrong, like, by the end of this film, we really do know who both of these characters are. And the film does a really good job at showing that, though these are two characters, they're very similar in many ways than you would think. And I think that's something that also was really interesting, is that these characters have very clear similarities to them, which you're not really going to realize until this film ends. But I think if we would have focused just a tiny bit more on Tate, those similarities would have come even more to the forefront, and I think it would have made the ending that much more impactful. Also, the ending to this film, I think, is fantastic. It's an ending that some people, I think, aren't going to understand at first glance, but it's one of those endings that I just haven't been able to stop thinking about, and I think it adds a different layer to the film than we really were thinking about. There's a twist that happens towards the end that I definitely did not see coming, and I thought it just made things that much more effective, that much more richer in terms of storytelling, and I really just ate it up a lot. I really liked where they end up going with the ending here. Overall, Possessor is one of the most original films that I have seen all year. It has a very talented cast, a masterful performance from Christopher Abbott, a really riveting and compelling story that, though we've seen before, goes a lot deeper into the human psyche than you really are expecting it to. It has relentless directing from Brandon Cronenberg, who really just shows how much of a force he is to be reckoned with. Like I said, I think this is definitely a name that we're going to hear a lot more moving forward after this film. It has some incredible cinematography, an amazing score, and just overall is everything you could want in this type of horror film. No, this is not going to be a film for everyone. If you're very squeamish and things like that, it's definitely not a film for you. But if you want a really original and twisted body horror film, I really can't think of a better film to watch right now than Possessor. I think this is an absolute must-watch. I think it's a film that is really going to impress a lot of people, and I think it's a film that's going to surprise a lot of people too. I think you'll go into this film expecting one thing, and you're going to get something completely different, but I mean that really in the best way possible. Possessor is absolutely one of my favorite films of the entire year, and I'm definitely going to give it overall an A. But overall, guys, in my review of Possessor, let me know what you guys saw of this movie overall. Lift your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.